My name is Paige Tanner and I'm 34 years old. 6 weeks after giving birth to my daughter Nora, I was lying flat on a hospital gurney with a broken collarbone, 2 cracked ribs, and a phone pressed to my ear, begging my own mother to go pick up my newborn from my neighbor's house. The accident happened on a Tuesday morning. I'd left Nora with my neighbor Diane just to run a quick errand, formula, a few groceries, maybe 20 minutes round trip. A driver ran a red light on Clearwater Avenue and slammed into the driver's side of my car so hard I blacked out before the airbag even fully deployed. I came to with paramedics leaning over me and someone asking who they should call. I gave them my mother's number without a second thought. That's what you do, right? You call your parents. You assume they'll come. I was still in triage when my mother finally picked up. I told her everything as calmly as I could, that I was at St. Augustine Medical, that I was being admitted, that Nora was with Diane on Fern Court and needed to be picked up within the hour. My mother went quiet for a second. Then she said she needed to talk to my father. I sat there in a hospital gown, phone shaking in my hand, listening to muffled voices on the other end of the line. When she came back, her tone had already changed. She said they had plans, a dinner reservation they'd been looking forward to for weeks. She told me to call a babysitting service. I thought I'd misheard her. I asked her to repeat herself. She did. I told her Nora was 6 weeks old. 6 weeks. Not some toddler who could wait a few hours in a stranger's house, a newborn who needed to be held, fed on schedule, cared for by someone who knew what they were doing. I told my mother I was in the emergency room with broken bones and I needed her. And my mother, the woman who raised me, who I had supported financially for nearly a decade, said something I will never forget as long as I live: your sister never has these emergencies. She had a Caribbean cruise. That was her answer. My sister Bree was on a 10-day Caribbean cruise she'd booked 3 months earlier, and somehow, in my mother's mind, that was the comparison worth making. Bree was floating somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico on vacation. I was strapped to a hospital bed in a chest brace, and my 6-week-old daughter was sitting in a neighbor's living room, waiting for someone to come get her. And my parents were worried about a dinner reservation. I hung up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just hung up and stared at the ceiling of that triage bay for a long moment, listening to the hospital move around me, the beeping monitors, the rolling carts, someone coughing behind a curtain down the hall. Then I opened my phone and started making calls. I found a vetted emergency childcare agency through a quick search, right there from the hospital bed. I explained the situation, gave them Diane's address, authorized payment over the phone, and within 40 minutes a certified caregiver was at Diane's door. I coordinated the whole thing between x-rays, arranged a car seat transfer, texted the caregiver Nora's feeding schedule, made sure Diane had my room number. I handled every piece of it alone, from a gurney, with a broken collarbone. And while I lay there waiting to be moved to a room, something shifted in me. Not grief exactly, something colder, something more focused than grief. I opened my banking app and looked at the automatic transfer I'd set up years earlier, the one that went out on the first of every month without fail. $4,500 a month, for 9 years. I'd started sending it when my father lost his job and they nearly lost the house. I kept sending it because I believed that's what good daughters do. I never complained, never asked for anything back, never let them feel it was a burden. Over 9 years, it added up to $486,000, nearly $500,000 sent to people who had just told me to call a babysitting service. I canceled the transfer right there. No phone call. No explanation. I just canceled it and set my phone down on the bedside table that I was moved to a room on the 3rd floor around 7 that evening. The caregiver sent me a photo of Nora sleeping, curled up in her car seat in a clean onesie. I was moved to a room on the 3rd floor around 7 that evening. The caregiver sent me a photo of Nora sleeping, curled up in her car seat in a fresh onesie, looking so small and so peaceful it made my chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with the broken ribs. I sent back a thank you and told her I'd check in again in an hour. It was around 8:30 when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Slow, deliberate footsteps, the kind that belonged to someone older. The door opened and my grandfather walked in. He stood in the doorway a moment, taking in the brace, the hospital gown, and his expression was something I couldn't quite name. Not pity, something more serious than pity. He pulled a chair close to my bed, sat down, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "I heard what happened. All of it." I didn't ask how. My grandfather, Gerald Tanner, was 79 years old and sharp as a blade. He had a way of knowing things before anyone told him. Always had. He reached over and put his hand over mine, the one without the 4 line, and just held it for a moment without saying anything else. That silence meant more to me than any words my parents had offered all day. Then he said, "Your mother called me to complain that you hung up on her." I almost laughed. Almost. I told him exactly what happened, the accident, the phone call, what my mother had said about Bree's Caribbean cruise, the dinner reservation, all of it. I told him about hiring the caregiver from the hospital bed. I told him about canceling the transfer. I told him everything, and he sat there and listened without interrupting once, something very few people in my family have ever managed to do. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You've been carrying this family for a long time, Paige. Too long." Something cracked open in my chest when he said that. Not the ribs, something else. Something I'd kept sealed shut for years. I had never once let myself say out loud that I was tired of it, that the monthly transfers had stopped feeling like generosity and started feeling like obligation, that I'd been quietly afraid for years that if I ever stopped, if I ever needed something in return, there would be nothing there. And now I knew. Now I had proof. My grandfather stayed almost 2 hours. He helped me call the caregiver to check on Nora again. He sat with me while I ate a hospital dinner I could barely taste. And when he left, he squeezed my hand and said he was proud of me. He said it simply, without ceremony, the way he said everything, and I held on to those words all night. My parents showed up the next morning, not because they'd had a change of heart. I could tell the moment my mother walked in that she'd come to manage the situation, not apologize for it. She wore that particular expression she gets when she feels wronged, chin slightly raised, mouth set in a tight line. My father hung back near the door with his hands in his pockets, the way he always does when he knows my mother is about to speak for both of them. She started with the dinner. Explained it was their anniversary reservation, not just any dinner, that I could have called someone else. She said she understood I was upset, but that I needed to understand her side too. She did not ask how I was feeling. She did not ask about Nora. She did not say the word sorry. I let her finish. Then I told her, calmly, that the monthly transfer had been cancelled permanently. Not paused. Not reduced. Cancelled. I told her I'd sent $4,500 every month for 9 years, $486,000 total, without complaint, because I believed families showed up for each other. I told her that the night before, lying in a hospital bed with broken bones and a 6-week-old who needed someone, she had shown me exactly where I stood, with no ambiguity at all. And I told her I had adjusted accordingly. My mother's face moved through several expressions in quick succession. Shock first, then something harder. She said I was being dramatic. She said one dinner didn't erase 9 years. She said she was my mother and I was punishing her. I told her I wasn't punishing anyone, I was simply making a decision about my own money based on new information. There was nothing emotional about it. Just a decision. My father finally spoke from the doorway, suggesting maybe we all needed to calm down. I told him, as evenly as I could, that I was completely calm. He had nothing to say to that. They left 20 minutes later. My mother didn't hug me on her way out. I noticed. I filed it away. I let it go. I was discharged 2 days later. My grandfather came to pick me up himself, drove me to Diane's to collect Nora, and helped carry everything up to my apartment. He put the kettle on while I sat on the couch with Nora on my chest, both of us finally home, both of us finally still. There's something nobody tells you about the moments when family fails you. They also clarify things. They strip away the noise, the pretending, the decades of excused behavior, and leave you with something clean and honest. I knew exactly who had shown up for me. I knew exactly who hadn't. And holding my daughter in that quiet apartment, I knew I was going to be just fine, not because my parents came through, but because even when they didn't, I did want to be notified when Claude responds. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.